NFL teams can start making deals with their free agents on Monday. Of course, nothing can get signed until Wednesday. But what are the chances that the New York Giants and head coach John Harbaugh do some of their shopping down in Baltimore? Let's talk about it next on the Big Blue Breakdown live. Hi again, everybody. Paul Dottino with you on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Welcome to tonight's program. We're kind of making this one a special free agent edition because, let's face it, free agency is just a few days away and it will start on Monday. And we'll be back again next week. And I won't even announce a time for next week's show because it's going to be how news warrants. Let me get this out of the way right now. If there's big Giants free agent news on Monday, we're going to try to do a show Monday night. If there's big Giants free agent news on Tuesday, we'll try to do a show on Tuesday night. And if all is quiet with the Giants until Wednesday, well, then we'll wait until our Wednesday usual time at 8 p.m. Just make sure, if you guys don't subscribe to the program, that you stick with me on my Twitter page, or X, if you will, at Giants WFAN. I promise to give you any show information that I can I can give to you as early as possible as to whether or not we'll have a show that night, and either we may have a really good special guest to talk about whatever move was made, or maybe it'll just be a chance for you guys to chime in, hopefully make some phone calls or some video calls. If you don't want to go into the chat, that's great. Remember, I love taking calls. You know, if you don't want to call Big Blue Kickoff Live during the day, or you're working, or you've got something going on, join me on this program tonight. That's why this program is here. It's a nighttime alternative, kind of like those primetime game shows, right? You used to have all those game shows during the daytime, and then all of a sudden it was the primetime version. Well, this is the primetime version, if you will. So that sets the table for what we are talking about over the course of the next week. Now, coming up tonight, all right, in just a little bit, I'm going to have Baltimore Ravens insider Ken Weinman of 105.7 FM in Baltimore. He's been down in Ravens country for about the last 20 years, and he specifically covers the Ravens and baseball's Baltimore Orioles. He is a weekday daily host on a program down on 105.7, The Fan in Baltimore, and he joined me earlier today, and we'll have that conversation coming up in just a short while as I peppered him for all of his Ravens information. I wanted to ask him more about Harbaugh, how he approaches free agency, how the Ravens did it, how much the Ravens will try to hold on to their players, which ones of the Ravens players are they talking about in Baltimore as possible guys heading up to New York to play for the Giants. You know, we all talk about here up in the New York metropolitan area, the fans and the people online and the people on the radio stations. Everybody wants Tyler Linderbaum. Yeah, okay, great. But what are the people in Baltimore saying about Tyler Linderbaum? Is he going to stay? Is he not going to stay? And if he doesn't stay, who do they think he's going to play for? Because down in Baltimore, I'm going to tell you right now, first of all, I think he's too expensive for the Giants. But the other thing that I will tell you is the people in Baltimore know there's going to be a bidding war for him. They're well aware that there's a slew of teams that are going to come after him if the Ravens don't re-sign him. So it's kind of unrealistic to have your blinders on if you're in New York and say, well, Tyler Linderbaum played for the Ravens when John Harbaugh was there. He really likes him as a player. He's going to go get him. That's a very, very unrealistic point of view. So hopefully by the time you guys get done listening to Ken Weinman, you will have a much more realistic understanding about which free agent or pending free agent, they're not there yet, pending free agent Baltimore Ravens are legitimate possibilities for the Giants and why, and which guys probably will not be legitimate or realistic opportunities or options for the Giants. That's why I called Ken today, because I felt it was very, very important to get this issue kind of cleared up, because I'm hearing too many people, talking about Linderbaum, and it's a fantasy. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense once you find out all of the elements from every particular corner on the square. But we'll let Ken tell you guys about that in just a little bit. For now, let's take a moment to review the news from yesterday. Yes, the Giants confirmed today they are releasing middle linebacker Bobby Okereke. Now, I've always said to you folks that when I give you an opinion, it's what I would do. I don't predict what the team is going to do, and I'm not going to say like I know what the team is going to do. One thing we know about John Harbaugh and in his short time with the Giants, no information, none, is leaking out of the building. He has put a cork in all of the leaks around the building. You will notice that all of these transactions that have been coming out over the last couple of months, they're coming from the other side of the transaction. They're coming from people either outside the building, outside the organization, media members across the country, or in some cases, coming from where the guy who's coming here originates from. If you've just kept score, you've noticed that. Nothing is coming out of the Giants building these days. And that's just the way it is. And so I'm not going to be fraudulent in any way by telling you sources say, I've been told. I love some people who do that when it's already been posted on the website, and then they come back and they post sources say, and I've been told. Okay, Giants.com told you, just come out and say it. But anyway, it is what it is. The point is this. As you look at the Giants situation, I look at it with all the different angles of the prism, from a coach's perspective, from a general manager's perspective, from a roster perspective, from the player's perspective, from an agent's perspective. I like to call it the multifacets of the prism, because there are many, many, many spider webs attached to every single issue. Well, when I looked at the Bobby Okereke issue, I valued very strongly, his final month and a half of the season, when he looked like Bobby Okereke from 2 years ago. Not even the 2025 season, when he had the disc problem in his neck and had to miss a bunch of games. I'm talking about the Bobby Okereke who played here in 2024. He was pretty darn close to being a Pro Bowl player. Well, I saw that guy the last month or so of the season. And as you know, I have often said, when you have a slew of guys on a unit, in this case the Giants defense, underachieving, that's got to point more towards the schematics or a coaching issue. If it's just one guy underachieving, now you have to look at that one guy and say, what's going on with him? But when the whole unit underachieves, as the Giants defense did for the last year and a half, until Charlie Bullen took over, well, the evidence is pretty overwhelming. You can kind of figure out exactly what was going on there. So I found it myself, and again, I'm not telling you what Joe Shane or John Harbaugh were thinking. Myself, I'm saying Bobby Okereke still has some of that 2024 football in him. And so I think he could still be a good middle linebacker for the team. And that's a judgment. That's an opinion. Everybody can have a different opinion. I then looked at the $9 million and said, okay, well, if they get rid of him, that's another hole that has to be filled on the roster. And if you're using it as a salary cap cut, well, you save $9 million, but then you have to give back $5 million on the dead cap, which means if you were to sign a veteran middle linebacker for more than $4 million, you add the dead cap, which is 5, plus the money it takes to sign a new veteran middle linebacker. If it's $4 million, well, then it's 9, right? The total is 9, 5 in dead, 4 in the new signee. That means you're paying $9 million for your veteran middle linebacker. That's a wash. The Giants are not in great salary cap territory right now. They're in the middle of the pack. Yes, they can finagle. They can release some guys. They can redo some deals. I understand that. They do have some flexibility. That is true. I looked at it and said, well, I think that Bobby Okereke is still a really good player. So if you release him, now you've basically, just to stay even, you'd have to sign a veteran middle linebacker for $4 million or less in 2026. Okay? That's what you'd have to do. Otherwise, you have hurt your cap. You're spending more for the middle linebacker spot than you were before. So I looked at it and I said, well, economically it doesn't make sense, but that assumes that you believe Bobby Okereke is still the guy who played here in 2024. Now, I don't know this coaching staff. They've just gotten here. It's only a couple of weeks ago. They assembled the new staff. I haven't talked to them. I haven't met them. I don't know what they think of the film. I also don't know for sure. It's always possible that the Giants may have asked Bobby Okereke to take less money and to reduce his salary cap charge. And as happens in this league a lot, and a lot of people don't understand this, when they see a guy cut, they either say, oh, well, he wasn't wanted anymore, or B, it was a salary cap situation. Well, that's true. But the third part to this equation that a lot of people forget is that sometimes they'll ask the player and say, listen, this is where we're at. We don't want to extend you. We do want you for the final year of your deal or the final 2 years, whatever it may be for that player. But we're not interested in extending you. Okay? We're not. And if he's in the last year of his deal, well, now there's no other way to shift the money around unless you extend him. So sometimes a team will go to a player in the last year of their deal and say, listen, we need you. We're looking for maneuverability. We need you to take a salary cut. Can we get your cap number down? We're not going to extend you. Basically, you're just going to have to take a little bit of a drop in pay. If you can't do it, we've decided that we need the room more than paying you the full rate. So if you can't help us out and give us some money back on this year's deal, we're going to have to release you. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't like the player. It simply means they told the player, we like you at a cheaper price, and if you're not willing to do that, well then, it's your choice. You tell us you think you can make that money on the street, then you tell us to release you, and that's what we're going to do, because you're not willing to take the shave in salary. That happens a lot more than you think. But of course, that doesn't usually make its way into the reports, because that's internal business. And really, what's the bottom line? All the public cares about is, does the player still belong on the roster? They really don't care how the player got cut from the roster or released from the roster. They just know he's not there anymore, and the front office has to go get somebody to replace him. So let me just make that fully clear, because I don't think enough of people really understand the different machinations that go on before a player winds up being jettisoned from a team's roster. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, what do you do now that you're the Giants? For whatever reason was behind it, They've announced they're releasing Bobby Okereke. Now, what does that leave the Giants with right now at the middle linebacker spot? Well, it's slim pickings. Let's just make it very clear. The only two legitimate middle linebackers that they had last year, and to some degree, Darius Muasau, he's a backup. He's not a legitimate starter. He's a backup. They had Micah McFadden and they had Bobby Okereke. Okereke's now released. McFadden's coming off of a broken foot. And yes, he has told me and many other reporters, this is not a secret, he put it out there to a lot of people, that he fully expects to have to take a 1-year prove-it deal coming off of his injury. And he was hoping that the new coaching staff would see his 100-plus tackles from the year before, would want to keep him, and that he could stay here on a 1-year prove-it deal. That is what Micah McFadden was very, very happy to tell people at the end of last season. I have no idea right now where that situation stands. I'm just telling you the truth. But even if he is planning to come back and they're planning to retain him on a 1-year contract, remember, he did come, or he is coming back off of a broken foot. So, do you automatically want to assume that he's going to pick up where he left off and that he'll be even better? Because every year he's been with the Giants, he has gotten better and better and better. Do you just want to assume that? Now, Bobby Okereke's spot, let's just put McFadden's spot onto the sideline for a second. Bobby Okereke was a team captain. He was the guy with the green dot calling all the defensive signals. He had over 140 tackles this year. But again, the last month or so was when he really started to look like himself again. So here's the issue. There are so many people who take a very superficial view of this and say, well, now you have to draft Sonny Styles at 5. Well, a couple of things that are wrong with that. It's a very, very shallow opinion. Because number one, there's no guarantee that Sonny Styles will be there at 5. It's probable, based on, that Mendoza's going 1. You figure 2 edge rushers are going to go in 2 of the next 3 picks. And who is going to be that 4th player that gets scapped up before the Giants get on the board? Will it be possibly Bain? Will it be possibly one of the old linemen? Could it possibly be Jeremiah Love at running back? Could it possibly be one of the wide receivers? I mean, it could be one of any number of people. And it could also be Sonny Styles. So there's no lock that Sonny Styles makes it to 5. And if he does, even if the Giants pick him at 5, okay? Now, that means you have Styles and you have Muasau under contract. We don't know if they're going to have McFadden under contract or not. And even if he is, we're not sure about his level of play coming off of a broken foot. So it says to me that, and I know you could draft another inside linebacker later on in the draft. That's true, but you also have a number of other holes to fill, whether it's free agency or whether it's the draft. And yes, there are other inside linebackers that you could get in later rounds. That is true. But do you really want to go into the 2026 season relying on potentially 2 rookies and Darius Muasau? Or maybe 2 rookies and Micah McFadden? Or a rookie, Muasau, and McFadden? Do any of those trios make you ultra confident that the Giants are going to be much improved on defense, especially against the run? I just simply ask you that question. Because it seems to me that this move almost necessitates that the Giants cover themselves and sign a veteran inside linebacker. Now, have you gone over the list of available inside linebackers in free agency? Have you done it? There are guys who are either ultra expensive at the top of that list or ultra old. One or the other. And besides, as I said, you come out with a net loss of cap room at the middle linebacker position if the guy you signed as a veteran free agent makes more than $4 million. So do you understand the quandary here? So anyway, off of the Okereke release, I did come up with a few names that potentially, pending free agents who could potentially be available at a reasonable or discount rate that might be good supplemental players to add to the Giants' inside linebacking core. There's Pratt from the Colts, Singleton from the Broncos, Stranad, also from the Broncos. He had the interception of Jackson Dart in the dramatic Broncos comeback in Denver earlier this year. And there's Gibbons from the Patriots. The interesting thing about Gibbons is he was with the Titans 2 years ago, where Denard Wilson, the Giants' defensive coordinator, was in Tennessee. And he had injured his shoulder late in the season and was not re-signed. Wound up signing with the Patriots during the offseason because of the connection to Mike Vrabel, the Patriots head coach, who had been with the Titans. And during the latter part of the season, when the Patriots had injuries, Gibbons actually started on the inside and had the green dot and did call the defensive signals. So he becomes a very interesting name because of the connection to Denard Wilson in Tennessee. And I suspect that those four players, veterans, who I believe would probably come in at a very reasonable rate, and depending upon where they finally landed number-wise, may not cost you, if they cost you four, may not cost you much more than four for the 26 season. So those are some of my thoughts, because obviously now that Okereke's released, the Giants have a gaping hole at inside linebacker, and they must figure out how to address it. And again, I reiterate, I don't think it's as simple as drafting a rookie or two. I don't think just drafting Sonny Styles at 5, if he is there, simply solves the problem. That's not the way I would see it if I were a GM. I'm sure the Giants have a couple of different options sketched out. I mean, they're going to be very thorough about this. And you don't just open up a hole in the middle of your defense unless you know that you've got something up your sleeve to try to plug it. So that's where things stand right now as I look at the Giants' middle linebacker position. Let me get to a couple of your comments in the chat, and then I want to bring in our special guest to tell you all about the Ravens free agent situation and how it might apply to the Giants. Isaac Moore says, bye-bye, Bobby O. Armand Duda says, thank you, Bobby. Once a Giant, always a Giant. Aiden Fink says, happy Wednesday, Paul and everybody. James O'Keefe, NY2TC. Good evening, Paul. How much cap space do you think we will get with cuts and restructures? It all depends on how many of those the Giants want to do. There are easily another handful of players who they could create cap room with should they decide to release them. And I don't think they necessarily are significant pieces on the roster. I'm sure you folks have looked at the message boards and looked at the articles. It's not really that hard to pick out the handful of guys who are less than pivotal pieces in the lineup or in the rotation. They're not really hard to find, to be frank with you. So I'll leave you to do that on your own. So those are the easy dollars that you can grab back in terms of salary cap room. The harder money is how do you either restructure or extend some of the guys at the richest part of your roster. Those are the difficult ones because now you have to break out the credit card and start making charges to your cap down the road, which is something the Giants have never really enjoyed operating under. All right, let's see here. Jay Wilgus. Oh, this is a new one. Jay Wilgus, 57. Hello, Paul. I really hope that Coach Harbaugh is able to acquire Isaiah Likely from Baltimore as well as Tyler Linderbaum. Jay Wilgus, 57. You're going to love this interview that's coming up in just a couple of minutes because I address the entire Ravens free agent situation. We go very much into detail as to what's realistic and what's not. You're going to love that conversation. It's coming up in just a couple of minutes. James O'Keefe comes right back. Says training camp a couple of weeks in West Virginia this summer. Yeah, that's the report. Again, the Giants haven't said anything about it, but you have to understand one thing. The World Cup is coming to MetLife Stadium. The Club World Cup was at MetLife Stadium last year, and that was kind of a demo for the real World Cup people to see how things run. If you have any idea what those folks did in the parking lot, they built like a mini city out in the MetLife Stadium parking lot with trailers, with concessions, mini stages for performances and everything. And I'm told like the World Cup, when they come to the stadium, they basically build a mini city. It's going to be like Hoboken North in East Rutherford. They will take over a huge amount of that parking lot space and build like a mini city for the World Cup, which goes all the way, I believe, till July 19th, if I'm not mistaken, with games. And then what happens when the World Cup is over and they play the last game and they blow the last whistle? Well, now you've got this mini city sitting on the property, and it's all got to be deconstructed. So there's going to be a lot of obstacles and things going on that Sports Authority property. So I'll leave it to you to logically figure out what you think makes the most sense given the very large, and I mean large footprint that the World Cup people will take and then has to be deconstructed. I stress to you that that's a primary situation here. You don't tell the World Cup people after you get the bid to host the game, you don't tell them, oh, we're not going to allow you to build that mini city in the parking lot. That's not the way it works. They come in and they take over and they build their mini city in the parking lot. And so you have to make your adjustments working around them and however you can create a workable scenario, so to speak. Okay, Armand Duda says, our Walter Payton Man of the Year nominees have all been on expiring contracts. Bobby wasn't, but he was let go the last 3 years. Oh, the nominees over the last 3 years is what he meant. Okay, fine. Aiden Fink says, big mistake cutting Bobby Okereke. The Giants are going to end up signing a veteran who just isn't the same or drafting an inexperienced rookie to replace him. Should have made an attempt to trade him. And once again, That's another part, Aiden. That's another angle that a lot of people don't understand or think about. Maybe they did. Maybe one of the roads that they were going down during these last couple of weeks as they're trying to figure this out, maybe one of those roads was trying to trade him. We know the Bears are trying to trade Tremaine Edmonds. And to this point, there have been no takers. That happens in the league all the time. T. Rose 2024 says they cut him for Styles. I already explained to you about 5 or 10 minutes ago why that is a very shallow and uninformed opinion. It's just not that simple. Isaac Moore says Sonny had 5 fingers, but he only used 3. Okay, whatever that means. I'm sorry, Isaac, I don't get it. Armand Duda says they cut him for cap space to sign free agents, but yes, they can fill the position with Styles. He says if he's there at 4, and now he says if he's there at 5. Again, you're now playing with a roll of the dice. Think about it. You don't know for sure he's going to be there at 5. That's the first risk of this. And then the second risk of this is, do you really want to go into the season without a proven, reliable veteran who at least would be an insurance policy at inside linebacker? I would not. That's just me. Maybe they're comfortable with that. Maybe they feel they have to be comfortable with that given their other needs and the amount of money they have to spend. Iman Perry says good evening, and I say good evening right back. Well, I'll tell you what, before we do anything else, let's get to our very special guest tonight. And, you know, we already know the Giants have some holes to fill going into the draft, and hopefully free agency will provide some answers. And Coach John Harbaugh may want to reconnect with some of his former Ravens. So I decided earlier today to head down Route 95 and bring in Ken Weinman. He is the weekday host of Inside Access on 105.7 Sports Radio The Fan in Baltimore. He has been covering the Ravens for nearly 20 years. Okay? 20 years. So I asked him how aggressive the Ravens might be in retaining some of their players. What is their MO? They've got an estimated $20 million in cap space as of now. We know it can be finagled. And they have nearly 24 pending free agents.
Okay, so the Ravens, even more so under Eric DeCosta than under Ozzie Newsome, have prioritized keeping their own free agents. The Ravens like to call themselves a draft and develop team. They don't like to get super involved in outside free agency. That said, I think that Tyler Linderbaum may be too expensive for them. I think that Isaiah Likely is to forgive the pun, is unlikely to be back with the Ravens. They tried all last season to try to get Isaiah Likely done, and you saw in December, and you guys covering the Giants weren't paying close attention to this, but the Ravens all of a sudden pivoted and extended Mark Andrews. And at that point, you kind of knew Isaiah Likely wasn't coming back. Isaiah Likely was primed for a big season last year, but I think broke his foot in training camp and was never right during the season. So if you're looking for guys that I think could interest John Harbaugh with the Giants, I think John Harbaugh loves Tyler Linderbaum. Tyler Linderbaum's going to be expensive. Eric DeCosta already said they offered him a market-setting deal. He's going to get even more than that. What Creed Humphrey's making $18 a year. So I think Tyler Linderbaum's starting at about $20 million a year. So you got to decide whether you can stomach paying a center that much money. The other part of it is he will be the quarterback of your line. But then the likely part, I think Isaiah Likely, even though he had a down year because of injury, I think he's going to be making big money too. That said, I do think the Giants have cap room. So if they want to pursue guys that John is comfortable with, those would be the two guys that I think he'd be targeting.
Well, we all know that cap room is always relative, because if you want to finagle some things, you want to cut some guys, you want to redo some contracts, you can always create more. Now, by my count, I was looking at obviously the online unofficial websites. They're telling me that the Ravens have about 20 million in cap room, and they've got 25 free agents. Now, I know that that's certainly a fluid number.
Yeah.
Linderbaum's going to cost a lot of money. I think we all agree. And I think you can probably tell me even better than anybody up here in New York, Ken, because his name's been floated, of course.
Sure.
There's going to be a lot of suitors for him. I mean, that's going to be a bidding war, isn't it, Ken?
Yeah, and I think you just added one more yesterday with the Bears center retiring suddenly to what's it, Dolman out of the blue. So I do think there's going to be a lot of suitors. The question is, and Tyler Linderbaum, talking to people I know, they think he may want to stay in Baltimore because he likes it here. That said, he has an agent whose job it is to try to get him as much money as possible. I don't know that the Ravens are going to be wanting to swim in the waters that free agency is going to take him. And I think he's going to eventually be too rich for their blood. Now, that said, I thought Ronnie Stanley was out the door a year ago, and they signed him, I think, a day before free agency opened. So could I see Tyler Linderbaum staying? Yes. The other domino in this, and this doesn't affect the Giants, but it does, is getting Lamar Jackson signed to an extension because his cap number is currently $74 million. Right. And yes, they could add void years to the deal and bring his number down to what it was a year ago. But what they'd like to do is sign him to a new deal and push the money back, push the money a little bit, take his cap number down somewhere where that gives them even more cap room for this year.
So aside from him, are there a number of other candidates on the Ravens' current roster that you could see them either chopping or restructuring so that if they did want to juggle to try to save some of these other free agents or Linderbaum, that they could do it?
Well, Marlon Humphrey is a candidate. Marlon Humphrey's had a weird career because he's a two-time All-Pro, not Pro Bowl, All-Pro. And 2 years ago, he was an All-Pro. Last year, frankly, he stunk. So he's due to make $19 million this year. I know Eric DeCosta, when he spoke at the Combine, said, yes, we want Marlon back, and we don't foresee him having to make an alteration. Yeah, that's what you say at the Combine. I can't see Marlon Humphrey playing on that number. So I like to say EDC takes guys to the barber shop and gets a little clip here, a little cut there. I think Marlon Humphrey is in line for a cut. I do think while I would look at him as a post-June 1 release, I think they're going to bring him back, possibly be a nickel corner or even try to convert him into a safety. But even then, $19 million is too much. Guys, as far as like a Broderick Washington, who is a run-stuffing defensive tackle, he's a guy that comes to mind immediately as a guy that I think is going to be released. So there are ways to massage this to get them some more money. And those are two of the names that come front of mind as far as adding cap room for them.
All right. I'd like to ask you about some specific players in terms of their play and if you think the Giants might be interested, or Team X for that matter, because technically I can't talk about the Giants, but you can. In terms of John Harbaugh's influence, though, before I get to some of the players, he basically comes to the Giants and he's working collaboratively, right? That's the word that we're hearing with general manager Joe Schoen and Donna Ponte, who also has been brought in to the Giants front office. We understand that he was looking for a setup that would mirror what he had in Baltimore. So how much influence did John Harbaugh have, in fact, in obtaining free agents while he was with the Ravens, assuming he will want that type of force when he's here?
So, Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like he's got much more influence with the Giants than he ever had with the Ravens. The Ravens sort of had a separation of church and state. Eric DeCosta, the general manager, took care of the roster, and then John, with his coaches, coached the roster. I don't feel that John – now, there would be a player every now and then that during the draft process that John would say, I really like this guy. But it was the scouting department and Eric DeCosta's purview as far as putting the roster together. I feel like with the Giants, just looking from the outside, that Dawn Aponte and Joe Schoen are working collaboratively with John, because John's at the top of that pyramid now. This is the John Harbaugh show. They wanted John Harbaugh badly. They're paying him $20 million a year, and he's now got much more influence on the roster construction than he ever, frankly, had in Baltimore.
Yeah, well, you certainly don't give him the kind of deal that he got to diminish any influence that he may have. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and John, while it got stale here and it was time to go here, that doesn't diminish the fact that John Harbaugh is an incredible leader of men. And, the Giants targeted him, and one of the owners flew down immediately to talk to him. And I totally understand why they pursued him and hired him.
He says, and he's very fond of saying, he wants guys who love football and who are all
Sure.
about football all the time. How would you characterize a John Harbaugh type player?
I think he's gotten more flexible as it's gone. But John and his brother Jim are very similar in, they're from the Jack Harbaugh, so the father who was a coach. They live, breathe, eat football. They love their sayings. John's about mighty men. You'll see him at training camp. He'll have T-shirts with phrases on them. Like he is his life is football. So. And I'm not familiar with what it was like under prior coaches in New York, but John Harbaugh, yeah, the John Harbaugh experience will be guys. He would prefer guys that love football. But if they're great football players, as the old Jimmy Johnson school of thought, there are more allowances for great players than for good players.
Right, for sure. We will hear more from Ken Weinman of 105.7 The Fan in Baltimore. Again, 20 years, almost 20 years of experience covering the Ravens. You can tell from his conversation, he is very up on that organization. He's got plenty more to say specifically about Ravens free agents. This was a little bit more in part one about John Harbaugh, much more about specific Ravens free agents coming up in just a little bit when we give you the remainder of that conversation. Now, we go back to some of the comments here that we see here on the chat, and some of these are a little bit funny. T-Rose 2024 says we might shop Jeremiah Love. He's thinking at the number 5 pick, the running back, of course, out of Notre Dame. I don't think that's very likely. I don't know where that rumor is coming from, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, it's redundant. See, if John Harbaugh and I have no reason to believe he wasn't serious when he came to the Giants and he started talking about being a winning organization right away and, being in the conversation for playoffs. I believe he means that. I have no reason to doubt him. I believe he really believes that and means it. And he has said it several times in a number of other national interviews since his press conference. Well, to do that, the Giants need to plug as many holes as they possibly can. It doesn't make sense to do something redundant. And drafting Jeremiah Love would be redundant with having Scatterboo and Tyrone Tracy. Signing Tyler Linderbaum, especially at a very expensive rate, which some people estimate is going to take $20 million a year, which the Giants really don't have to spend, would be redundant when they have a center in John Michael Schmitz who has gotten better every year. Now, he's still not where you'd want him to be. You still want him to improve, but he just had his best season in 2025. And that's a hole right now that really doesn't have to be filled. It's already got something in it. Redundancy is a very, very, very painful thing when you're talking about a team that does not have a lot of salary cap room. T-Rose 2024 says, AP want to trade back. I know my GM. I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means either. Anyway, Iman Perry says, goodbye, bye, Bobby Okereke, thank you for your services. He also says, I trust John Harbaugh. Isaac Moore, 1248, says, I don't care who he picks at 5. Armand Duda with a very wise statement. Rookies are rookies, no matter how talented. And that is about as true a statement as you're ever going to find in the National Football League. That is very, very true. Isaac Moore, 1248, says some rookies can't be contained. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that verbiage. It is true that occasionally some rookies come in, and when they're Rookie of the Year candidates, they can perform very well, but they still make their share of rookie mistakes. That's just a fact. And it depends on when they make them, how many they make, and does the other team take advantage of them? And that's what ultimately determines that rookie's production. Once again, Isaac, you got to peel back all the layers of the onion and fully understand. It's just not that simple to say, well, there were some rookies who were great and right out of the box, and they're going to be wonderful and give you great production. Sometimes that production is a little bit of a camouflage because maybe the mistakes were made in non-key situations, or maybe the mistakes were made and the other team didn't see those mistakes, and therefore they didn't take advantage of them. Dylan9329 says Quay Walker or Devin Lloyd will end up a Giant. Both of those inside linebackers are going to cost you a pretty penny. Again, I don't know what the Giants' appetite is to pay a substantial amount of money for an inside linebacker. That's why when I went through a list before of potential inside linebacker free agents for Team X, if you will, I was looking at guys who could come in at a reasonable rate and potentially outplay their salaries. Wilfred P9V, fan of yours, 43 years. Wilfred, you must be referring to the Behind the Blue feature that the New York Giants production staff did. I guess it was a week or so ago. They posted it up on the website and then had a promo with to send people to the feature. And yes, I was a part of that. And yes, I am going to be going into my 44th consecutive season of covering the Giants and 18th as part of the official broadcast team. And so it is certainly a labor of love. And thank you very much, not only for being a fan, but for joining us on the program. And please do come again. Isaac Moore says, Nakobe Dean, again, you're talking about a guy who's probably going to be a little bit on the higher end of the price tags. And he's also had injuries. But we will see. This is why, again, folks, nobody knows what the Giants are planning to do. They've got a plan B. Plan A, obviously, resulted in the release of Bobby Okereke. Nobody knows what part 2 is or what plan B is. Believe me, nobody outside the building knows. So we could keep throwing out these hypotheticals all you like. All you can do is sit back and say, okay, based on the price tag of those players, does it make sense given the Giants' status and where they are right now? Who knows? Maybe they've got a plan in place where they can afford to spend a little bit more on an inside linebacker. Maybe they do have that plan. I don't know if they do. So you can only make a rational comment or draw a rational conclusion, a logical conclusion, based on what you have firsthand knowledge of, based on the facts before us. Anything could be hiding behind the curtain. Wilfred P9V says draft a wide receiver or the running back at 5. Well, I've kind of flipped my thought process on all of this. I am now of the opinion that the Giants will be better off drafting heavily on defense. Pat Kerwin was the one, again, during the Giants huddle at the Combine, who really, in conjunction with all the other factors, all the other layers of the onion, when Pat Kerwin said, you're better off using free agent money and trying to get some reasonable bargains with veteran free agents on offense because you can surround Dart with guys who are experienced, poised, know what they're doing, can have leadership skills, and make sure that this offense grows with Jackson Dart. You do that, and then concentrate your rookie class, your draft class, on the defensive side of the ball, where you have some holes to fill. You've got some really good players who can maybe help some of those rookies along quickly as they enter the Giants locker room. And to boot, the other part to this equation is that they can all grow together simultaneously with the core veteran talent that's already there on that side that's going to be around hopefully for at least another couple of years. So it really does make more sense to address the underachieving defense more heavily with the draft and go after offensive help in free agency, as long as you don't go expensive. Again, you have to find bargains, and the guys that you sign have to hit. You can't have misses. One of the reasons that the New England Patriots made it to the Super Bowl, I think if you look at last year's offseason, their list of free agents, the guys that they signed, like every single guy gave them at least what they paid for, if not more than what they paid for. That's hard to do. It is. But the Patriots got that. And it drove them all the way to the Super Bowl. Nothing is worse than signing a free agent and not getting the value that you expected when you bought the player. I don't think the Giants got that out of Paulson Adebo last year. He was hurt some, but he did not play as advertised. Javon Holland, I'm sure he would tell you, he did not have a typical Javon Holland year either. And I don't want to just single those two players out. But when you make a free agent purchase, especially if it's an expensive one, those guys, it's mandatory for them to live up to their price tag. If they overplay their price tag, it's great. It's wonderful. But they have to play to their price tag. They can't play under it. That just doesn't work. Armand Duda says we have a hole in leadership without Bobby Okereke too, and I understand that. He was a co-captain. T Rose 2024 says John Harbaugh getting the cap space together. Aiden Fink says, do you think Theo Johnson is the answer at tight end for the Giants? Well, he has to be. Okay? Because you don't want another hole. And if you're going to give up on Theo Johnson, that's another hole you're going to have to plug. Now, Theo has admitted that during this offseason, he needs to work very, very hard on catching the football. He realizes that there was a technique issue when he was trying to catch the football last year, and he had, a half a dozen drops. I have it in my book, in my computer here. I've got my film study and my charts. Let me see what I gave him. But he admits that he had some trouble catching the ball, and it was a technique-oriented thing. And he told everybody the last day of a locker cleanout at the end of the 2025 season, he said, "Look, I got to work on that. I can't have that anymore. That can't happen." And so he needs to. He could be a really, really, really good tight end in this league and be very productive. 8 drops I have for Theo Johnson. A total of 8 drops. And let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of the 8 drops would have been first downs had he held on to the ball. and one of his drops would have been a touchdown. That gives you an idea of how important it was for him to hold on to the ball. And for the season, he caught 45 passes and 5 touchdowns. And you guys know, I usually look at the litmus test, 6% drops. 6 drops per 100 catches is kind of where I start to grind my teeth. He had 8 drops and less than 50 catches. That's not a good percentage. Not at all. And he knows that. So let's see if he and the coaching staff can help him fix that. T-Rose 2024 says, help us smash Eagles. We can fight later. Armand Duda says, soccer fans are a force of nature. Wilford P9V says, the greatest shown. I'm not sure I understand that. He also says, sign tight end Likely and running back Walker, draft wide receiver round 1. You're welcome. The reports are that Likely is going to come in at about $10 million for the year, a $10 million a year contract. That is way too expensive, I believe, for the Giants, especially when they have Theo Johnson on a rookie deal. So I don't believe that Likely is going to be someone that they're bid for. Kenneth Walker is another guy which would be redundant, because for them to go for a high-priced running back who was just the Super Bowl MVP does not, on the face of it, seem to make a whole lot of sense. And drafting a wide receiver in round 1, well, you guys know a few weeks ago, I was talking about Carnell Tate, but upon doing more film work and digging more and, again, kind of reconfiguring and formatting during the week of the Combine, I'm definitely going to be wide receiver later, not in round 1. If it's me, again, I tell you what I would do. I would not draft a receiver at 5. There are far too many second-level receivers. Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network claims there are 19 receivers in the first 3 rounds of this draft. Now, the bad news is the Giants don't have a 3rd-round pick. They traded it last year when they moved back into the 1st round to get Jackson Dart. Thank goodness the Houston Texans were willing to deal. But they now have that 3rd-round pick. So if you're the Giants, maybe you're hoping that at least one of those 19 that Daniel Jeremiah is talking about slips into the early 4th round, so that maybe early in the 4th, maybe that's where you grab a wide receiver. Or if you feel compelled at 37 at the top of the 2nd round, maybe that's where you grab the receiver. See, I kind of think myself, I'm to the point where I'm thinking we're looking at Downs or Styles at 5, and then hopefully a cornerback at 37. Maybe Chris Johnson, if he lasts. Maybe Hood, if he lasts. That's probably asking a lot. Okay? It's probably asking a lot. But that's kind of where I'm thinking right now. In terms of value and need, they kind of match. Okay? So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. Styles or Downs, I would probably go Downs, but I could be convinced to go with Styles pending what free agency winds up bringing for the Giants, if they can kind of plug that hole somewhat. And then corner, perhaps, at 37. And then in the 4th round, early 4th round, I'm thinking that's where I would try to go for a wide receiver. That's how I kind of sketch it out right now. Of course, that's also taking a chance with the offensive line. Are the Giants going to be able to either hope that their guys from within, their young guys from within, either they retain guys like Van Roten and Illuminor, or they're able to get guys like Kubas or Azudu to step up and make sure that they help solidify that offensive line? You know, if Illuminor doesn't come back, I mean, you're not going to be able to take care of every position. There's no way, I don't see how the Giants are going to be able to go into training camp saying, we feel good about all 22 starting positions and we feel good about a primary backup in each unit. I don't see how that's possible. It's just not. That's asking too much. It's too far down the road to get there. You just can't. There's not enough gas or money to make that happen. And there's Isaac Moore saying not happening, too much money. I'm not sure what player he's thinking about, but that answer is actually a good answer for a lot of different things. All right, let's go back to our interview because that's what a lot of you folks tuned in for anyway, and I want to do that. We go back to Baltimore, and Ravens insider Ken Weinman of 105.7 FM. Again, covering the Ravens for nearly 20 years. I brought up the fact that fullback Patrick Ricard, who's been mentioned a lot in these parts, he is a pending free agent and one who may draw the interest of new Giants coach John Harbaugh. Of course, Harbaugh loved him when he was in Baltimore. And right now, the Giants do not have a pure fullback on their current roster. Last year, Ricard made $2.7 million in his 9th season with the Ravens, and 9th, of course, in the NFL. So I asked Weidman if this veteran might be ready to drive up the Jersey Turnpike.
That's interesting, not only because of Harbaugh, because Greg Roman is part of that staff. And Greg Roman, of course, helped develop Patrick Ricard when he was the offensive coordinator here. So it's about comfortability, let's be honest, Paul, because fullbacks don't make a lot of money. And he's not going to break the bank, whether it be here or in New York. So if Pat Ricard, and I don't know the answer to this, but if he loves John and wants to stay with John, then yes, I could see. If he's comfortable here, then he probably stays here. But look, that's a question I don't know the answer to. My guess is he stays, but could I see John Harbaugh? He's had Pat Ricard with him for 7-8 years. So I could see that as a marriage.
Do you get the impression that the Ravens have an appetite to retain him?
Yes, but retain him, it's like it's at their price because there's no market for fullback. So if the Giants hypothetically were to swoop in and pay him X times 1.5, X point 1.5, that what the Ravens are getting, then I think that he might leave for that because there's been some acrimonious contract talks, but it's more like Kyle Juszczyk dealt with it in San Francisco. There's just no appetite to pay a fullback, so you end up staying where you are. So if the Giants were to give him a little more, yes, I could see him going to New York.
Because Ricard's been around a while, how much tread do you think is left on his tires?
So last year was a injury-plagued season for him. He did not play a lot. He didn't play at all early. He came back later than they expected. And I don't think he looked like Pat Ricard until late in the season. That said, he's a massive body. He's not your prototypical fullback. He was originally a defensive tackle that they converted to a fullback. So I think, do I think he can still play his level at a high level? Yes, I do.
All right, let's say a team wanted to get a veteran cornerback. Chidobe Awuzie is someone who would certainly interest me as Team X. I know he's on the other side of 30, but it seems to me that he's still got some productive football left in him. What are the odds that he, first of all, gets away from the Ravens? And then second of all, do you think he'll be very expensive?
I think he'll cost more than he did a year ago. Chidobe Awuzie has always played good football, at least in recent memory, but he's had trouble staying healthy. Now, he stayed healthy for the most part here in Baltimore. I do think, though, a few years ago, they signed Ronald Darby to a 1-year deal and played really good football. And I thought they were going to bring him back. He ended up signing a free agent deal, I think, in Jacksonville. The Ravens just decided they didn't want to double down on that. And I have a feeling that's going to be the case with Awuzie. I think the Giants, if John liked his year with him, I think the Giants may be able to get him. I don't think my gut says the Ravens aren't going to bring him back.
And it does look like he still has some mileage left, doesn't it?
He looked great last year. Remember the prior year or two before that, he had trouble staying healthy, which has been something that has dogged him throughout his career. He, for the most part, was healthy a year ago and played good football for the Ravens.
All right, I want to go to the offensive line because Daniel Falele, they're starting, I guess, right guard, is another guy who seems to be a hot and cold player down in Baltimore.
Yeah.
From what I keep hearing, some people think he's okay, and other people can't wait to see him leave.
Fans hate Daniel Falele. I can tell you that from first. He at times he would be described as like a parking cone. He's a big, massive body. Was drafted as a tackle out of Minnesota. They converted him to guard. I would think there's less. I do not think he will be a Raven next year. So John's got to decide. And this was part of this was a bane of a lot of fans' existence a year ago. As poorly as some fans thought he played, the fact that he was never replaced on the offensive line speaks to the depth they had on the offensive line a year ago. My gut says that he will be available. I would be hard pressed, though. John had the Daniel Falele experience the last 2 years firsthand. I can't imagine he brings him to the Giants, just knowing that he lived it. But maybe he saw him differently than I think he did. But if I'm a Giants fan, I don't know that I want Daniel Falele.
Okay, what about another offensive lineman who, when he got to the Ravens, had some higher expectations, but then it didn't seem like it worked out, and he quickly fell into Nowheresville, and that would be Joseph Noteboom.
Yeah, he was signed last year to be a swing tackle, but he's really more suited to be a guard. I don't think there's any chance he was just here 1 year, and like Awuzie, there's not a lot of time spent. But unlike Awuzie, he did not play good football, and it got to the point where there were weeks where they drafted a kid, Carson Vincent, who was like a project project tackle. There were weeks where he was up instead of Noteboom. So I do not think he's going to be a Raven next year. And I don't know that he's a needle mover, even if I were a Giants fan.
Well, the Giants may be looking for a swing tackle. And
Okay,
that was the reason that I threw his name out there as a possibility.
He was not a quality swing tackle last year for the Ravens. So maybe different coaching. Now, granted, I think, did you guys bring the Ravens? I'm trying to remember. Did the Giants retain their O-line coach from last year?
No, they released him.
Okay, so
that becomes a little bit of a question mark. And that's why, quite frankly, I think a lot of people here in New York are in the dark because we really don't know what this new coaching staff thinks about the holdover players, especially the backups.
Yeah, I can't remember if Harb's brought, and we call him Harbs, end up calling him that as well. If Harb's brought George Warhart with him
to
did not. New York. Okay, so he's got a new O-line coach. So maybe that guy with different eyes would be interested on taking a shot on Noteboom. I don't think that Warhop would want to be in the Noteboom business again.
Right. All right. So, in your estimation, are there any free agents on the pending list of the Ravens who are Harbaugh favorites? Maybe, every time a new coach comes into another program, he always wants to bring at least 2 or 3 players to help acclimate his system into the locker room. Are there maybe some guys under the radar who we're not necessarily thinking as, big time snap compilers, if you will, but guys who might help acclimate the system?
So I'm cheating a little. I'm going over the list to think of guys that Harbaugh might be interested in. And obviously, Linderbaum is a That's one, but he's going to cost you money.
Yeah.
Uh, Charlie Kohler could be a sneaky guy. Oh, I think Harb likes him. He's a free agent tight end, decent blocker, not a great blocker. I think there's more in the tank as far as pass catching ability. And with Roman, excuse me, I think they're going to like to do a little more two tight end stuff. So Kohler could be a sneaky guy as far as a possible Harbaugh kind of guy. It's interesting, though, because of the down year and some of the turnover, there's really not a lot of guys that I would classify as Harbaugh guys on this list, because a lot of these guys, Ricard would be another one. Ricard has been with Harbaugh for 7-8 years. So
Right.
Kohler and Ricard would be those two guys.
All right. So if you were to tell Giants fans what they can expect to see out of John Harbaugh's team as he comes in here for his first season, and he's already, in his introductory press conference, he said, we want to compete, and
Yes.
playoffs aren't out of the question. That set a high standard and has a lot of people in New York smiling. What would you tell the New York Giants fans about what they could expect?
Well, first and foremost, I'd expect competency at the very least, which is something just from the outside looking in at times from Giants head coaches since in recent vintage, they haven't always been competent. So you're going to have that. So at the very least, he's going to raise the floor. They're going to be competitive. They're going to, for the most part, play smart football. My question is, and my guess is, John's going to have a long talk with Jackson Dart about sliding. Like, because I think Jackson Dart has a chance to be a good quarterback, but he's got to stop taking hits. And again, I'm looking at this from the outside. And like, you can't on a September Sunday try to run over a safety. Like, you got to live for the next play.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to have a long conversation with Jackson Dart. But that,
as you can tell, the Jackson Dart running conversation has spilled over into practically every NFL market. That's not just here in New York. Thank you so much to Ravens insider Ken Weinman of 105.7 The Fan in Baltimore. Again, nearly 20 years of covering the Ravens, as well as the Baltimore Orioles of Major League Baseball. As you could tell, very plugged in to the situation in Baltimore, and I thought his insight was incredibly valuable. And you heard he mentioned specifically he thought that maybe Ricard and Kohler, the backup tight end for the Ravens, would be potentially the two Harbaugh favorites that would be potential travelers to East Rutherford. So I give you that. And again, as you heard him say, Linderbaum is going to be incredibly expensive, and there are teams that are going to line up and try to make bids for him. So let's just try to put that one to rest and not waste any more time discussing the center. All right, let's see what else we have tonight. I'm going to try to take this program for another 20 minutes, folks. If you want to try to get in on some comments, and there are so many of them here. Let's see here. Isaac Moore, 1248 says, get Stephon Diggs too while you're at it. Well, he caught over 1,000 yards worth of passes last season. I sincerely doubt that Stephon Diggs is going to come in at a reasonable rate as he came off of his horrible leg injury the year before and made it back and regained star status. I'm sure he is going to want cash that appropriately reflects his terrific comeback. NPR 254, if Downs and Styles are taken, who do we get? Well, it's highly unlikely that that's going to happen, because if it does happen, right, then that means either Reese or Bailey are going to be on the board. So I guess to address your question, if Downs and Styles both get taken, Reese or Bailey, in all likelihood, are going to be left. So whichever one of those two is left, you'd be very happy with either one, because both of those guys are considered practically universally as top 5 picks. So think about it, right? Think about it. If you knock off Mendoza, you knock off Downs, and you knock off Styles, there's only one more pick till you get to 5. So if Reese is taken, you could get Bailey. If Bailey is taken, you could get Reese. Now, Reese says he wants to be an edge rusher, but in reality, he has played off-ball linebacker most of his time in college, and you could feel fine about taking him and plugging him into the lineup just as you would Sonny Styles. He wants to be an edge rusher, of course. Edge rushers make more money. They compile sexier stats, and they get more fame and fortune. I totally understand that. But if you're the Giants, and if you wind up with Arvell Reese at 5, I would imagine he's playing inside. Now, Bailey, you know what? They always say you can't have enough pass rushers. Well, if Bailey is there on the clock at 5, that would be a situation where I could see them taking a Bailey, right, and making a move. Now you can work the phones because you're in a great position of strength. If somehow Bailey drops to 5, you know there's a team salivating to take that edge rusher. So you either take him yourself if you really want to, and you trade Kayvon Thibodeau, who I am not an advocate of trading, but in that scenario, it would make an awful lot of sense. Or there might be a team that's so desperate for an edge rusher and they know that Bailey is a premier player at a premier position, maybe you can fleece somebody and make a deal. So, in answer to your question, if Downs and Styles are taken at 5, I've just given you the only other scenario that probably is going to be available to you. And Isaac Moore says that won't happen. Probably not. Probably not. But as All My Duda says, prepare for all outcomes, and that's what you have to do. The Icy Revenge says, are there any rumors about the Giants potentially signing Christian Wilkins? I have seen some things online about that, but not with any substance whatsoever. None. Not from anybody who would even have logical connections to put those equations together. I don't see how that happens. And as I say, the Giants building is airtight these days, so no one's leaking out that information. That's a figment of someone's imagination, just like it is when they actually had the nerve to ask Joe Shane about rumors of trading Dexter Lawrence. I mean, come on, folks, please. Aiden Fink, Diggs might be behind bars. I wouldn't go for Diggs, Isaac. I would rather go for Mike Evans. Well, Mike Evans is also going to demand a very hefty contract, and he's certainly on the back 9. I don't know that makes a whole lot of sense with so much wide receiver talent in the draft. Oscar the Grouch 755. Much respect to you guys because you went out and got a proper head coach that is a proven winner. You will change the culture for the Giants. Wish I could say the same thing about my Jets. Your GM is questionable, but the head coach is an A+. All right, here we go. We got another one here. This is Vincent Lefantino, 8367. In free agency, the Giants should target the offensive line and wide receiver. I believe Downs and Styles will be there at 5, or if it's possible, trade a pick for DJ Moore. DJ Moore is apparently, they got some cap problems over there in Chicago, and they're talking about potentially maybe that is a guy that could be had. Certainly would be an interesting player. You would want to investigate that situation. Will Talk Entertainment, 8435. Hey, Paul, how do you think the Giants will handle the kicking situation? Gano is obviously gone. That would make economic sense. Correct. They've been struggling with special teams for a few years now. Well, actually, when Gano was healthy, he was one of the best kickers in the league during his time with the Giants. Even set a Giants all-time record for consecutive field goals made. So, I don't know that I totally agree with the last part of your statement, but yes, Graham Gano coming off of a neck injury and obviously making a very good buck. I definitely see the economic value in setting him free and getting that money for your salary cap. Now, I do not know what the new coaching staff thinks about, is it Ben Sauls? I believe Ben is his first name. Yeah, Ben Sauls. Ben Sauls was a kicker that the Giants brought in from the University of Pittsburgh. And I thought he kicked okay last year at the very end of the season. He did have that one horrible day where the wind was vicious at MetLife Stadium. And I know that's where he's got to kick if he stays on the team. He'll have to learn how to deal with that. I suspect that Sauls is going to be in training camp and competing, and the Giants will probably wind up picking up some veteran along the way to compete with him. That's what I think will happen, and I suspect that that veteran will come at a very reasonable rate. And then they'll have a competition and see what happens. And here, in fact, JFed4942 says, hopefully Gano gets cut. I never hope that for anybody, but he says, I'm comfortable going with Sauls. Max V1331, rather have Likely for $10 million than Wan'Dale for $20. I don't think the Giants are going to chase Wan'Dale Robinson up the economic ladder to $20 million. Nor do I think that they're going to give Isaiah Likely $10 million. Armand Duda says, Ben Sauls showed he can be the kicker. Should Coach Harbaugh see fit to find another, though he will. And that's how I see it, Armand. I think they'll bring in a veteran, a low-cost veteran, to compete in training camp. I don't know that they're going to draft one or that they're going to spend a significant amount of capital, money-wise, to bring in, although I don't think there are really any star kickers available. Aubrey was just tendered a second-round pick tender by the Dallas Cowboys. I don't think the Giants are going to go after him. JDJ, Paul, I think the Giants are about to have one of the toughest training camps that some of these tenured players have gone through in years. Coaches taking them away from New Jersey and all the distractions. Look, John Harbaugh is as much like Tom Coughlin as you're going to get. That is his reputation, coming from Baltimore, where he went to the playoffs 12 years in 18 seasons. So with that kind of track record, making the postseason 2/3 of the time, I think you're pretty much, optimistic that he should be able to do some damage here. And when I say damage, I mean that in a good way. And I do believe that, the Giants will do everything they can to make that possible for him. Why not? I mean, he signed a very, very lucrative contract to do what he does best, and that is win. Dart to neighbors. Why draft an edge with Burns and Abdul at that point? Go Tate. Why? Again, they got a variety of things they can do if it comes down to Bailey being available at 5. I don't see how that happens, quite frankly. I think that is a very, very deep long shot for Bailey to be there at 5. But if he is, it puts the Giants in a very intriguing situation. Armand Duda says, John Harbaugh is known for having the toughest camp. Yeah, he runs a tight ship. He also mentions that the Gano deal was a great one at the time. There's no question. Graham Gano, when he kicked for the Giants, yeah, there was a game or two with the whole injury factor that wound up screwing things up. But look at his body of work. His body of work says he was an outstanding kicker for the Giants. All right, let's see here. JDJ says, Paul, you may have already answered, but if Styles, Downs are both on the board, who do you take and why? I think if it was 2 days ago, as I said coming out of the combine, I'm taking Downs. I'm taking Downs because there's more flexibility. Denard Wilson, the Titans defensive coordinator, is known to love the 3 safety package. He's very big on leaving the same back 7 personnel on the field so that he can scheme different types of coverages, disguise coverages, and cause pre-snap headaches for the other team. Okay? So he's very, very big on that. You can play Downs in many more different looks than you can play Styles. Styles is a middle linebacker. That's what he is. When the quarterback comes up to the line and he points and he goes, there's the mic, there's the mic. And he reads out the guy's number and says, he's the mic. That's where everything starts for the offense. It all starts when the quarterback comes up to the line and identifies the mic linebacker. That's the number one thing that they do when they break the huddle. Well, Sonny Styles, there's not going to be any secrets where he is. He's going to be where he is, and that's what he's going to do. He'll be the middle linebacker on every down, 3 downs on every series. Not so with Caleb Downs, who can be moved into a variety of roles at any time and give you different pre-snap looks that can cause problems for the offense. Because the second thing that a quarterback does, he looks for the mic, identifies the mic, and then he's looking at the safety. There's always going to be a safety who's going to give him a hint as to what the coverage is. And Downs' ability to be moved into so many different pieces. He can be a pawn, he can be a rook, he can be a king, he can be a queen. That's a bishop. How about a bishop? Right? All the different chess pieces. That's why I think I would go Downs. Now, if they don't do anything with the middle linebacker spot between now and the draft, and Sonny Styles is still sitting there, I would have a very hard time passing him. I find it hard to believe, though, that the Giants will not address the inside linebacker spot before the draft. I find that difficult to believe. So I'm going to hold on to Caleb Downs for the moment. But again, you can't lose with either player. You can't. You get Downs, great. You get Styles, still great. You can't lose. If those two guys are on the board at 5, it is a win-win-win. Armand Duda says, thankfully, the choice of who to draft at 5 is a good problem to have for once. Indeed. There is no doubt about that. Well, interestingly enough, we had a few new folks today on the chat, and we had some of our regulars not come around. So, all I can tell you is we're usually here on the Big Blue Breakdown Live at 8 p.m. Eastern Time every Wednesday for those of you who are new to the program. Now, next week, as I said at the top of this show, and I'm sure many of you were not with us at that moment, what I will wind up doing is going on with a program as Giants free agent news warrants. On Monday, okay, remember this, on Monday, agents can agree to parameters of deals with teams for their players. That goes on Monday and on Tuesday. On Wednesday, guys can actually start signing contracts. So if there is huge Giants free agent news on Monday or Tuesday, we might wind up doing a show Monday night or Tuesday night before we even get to Wednesday. That is very, very possible. All I can tell you is you can subscribe to the program, and that would be a guaranteed way that you won't miss anything. And of course, I'll do my best to get a really good guest on that night if there is a big headline coming out of the Giants' offices. Or we may just decide, you know what, maybe that's your show. Maybe you guys, you won't just feel compelled to do chats, but you'll do phone calls and you'll do video calls, and we'll have some great conversation about whatever it is that huge free agent headline is. But my point to you is this. If you don't subscribe to the program, then follow my page on X. It would be at Giants WFAN. And I will be sure to post show advisories as soon as I can when decisions are made if Giants free agent news warrants, and I'll be able to keep you informed as to whether or not we may do a show on Monday night or on Tuesday night, or we'll just be back again on Wednesday evening. Once again, if you missed any portion of this 90-minute show, go back into the archive. We had 2 full 10-minute segments with Ravens insider Ken Weinman of 105.7 FM, The Fan in Baltimore, with some outstanding insight on John Harbaugh, free agent philosophy that he brings to the Giants, as well as a really good inside look and a detailed look at which of the Ravens' pending free agents the Giants might actually have a chance or interest in plucking from Charm City. That'll do it for this edition of the program. I thank all of you for joining us. Until then, stay well. I'm Paul Dottino, and we will catch you next time on the Big Blue Breakdown. So long, everybody.